She thought he was gone until he returned for her. The gunshot echoed across the valley before anyone saw the rider. Katie dropped the water bucket and spun toward the sound, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 years. 3 years since they told her Jake was dead, buried in some unmarked grave after the ambush near the Mexican border. 3 years of sleepless nights and unanswered questions. Now someone was shooting at her ranch, and every instinct screamed danger. She ran toward the house, boots kicking up dust. Her father's rifle hung above the fireplace, loaded and ready. She'd learned to shoot when she was 8, back when her father still ran cattle across these lands. The ranch was smaller now, just her and 2 hired hands, but she'd held onto it through drought, debt, and the constant pressure from Cole Hartman to sell. Another shot cracked through the air. Closer this time. Katie burst through the door and grabbed the rifle. Through the window, she saw dust rising from the eastern ridge. Riders. At least 4 of them, maybe more. Her hand steadied as she checked the chamber. Whatever was coming, she wouldn't go down easy. The horses appeared first, dark shapes against the morning sun. Then she saw him. The lead rider sat tall in the saddle, hat pulled low, but something in the way he moved made her breath catch. She knew that posture, that careful way of holding the reins with his left hand because his right had been broken twice in bar fights. It couldn't be. The rider stopped 50 yards from the house. The man in front dismounted slowly, deliberately. He took off his hat, and Katie's world tilted sideways. Jake's face, older and harder, stared back at her. A scar ran from his temple to his jawline, and his eyes held a darkness that hadn't been there before. But it was him. She stumbled onto the porch, rifle forgotten in her hands. He raised one hand, palm out, a gesture that said both hello and don't shoot. The 3 men behind him stayed mounted, hands resting near their guns. They looked like trouble, the kind of men who lived on the wrong side of every law. Jake took 3 steps forward. His voice, when he spoke, was rougher than she remembered. Rougher, but unmistakably his. "Katie," he said, "I know what they told you. I know what you think happened. You're dead." The words came out strangled. They said you were dead. They lied. She wanted to run to him. She wanted to shoot him. She wanted to scream until her throat was raw. Instead, she stood frozen, watching this ghost walk toward her like he had every right to be there. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Why did you let me think? Because it was safer. For you. For me. For everyone. One of the men behind him shifted in his saddle. Jake glanced back, and Katie saw something pass between them. An understanding. A warning. "You need to leave," Jake said, turning back to her. "Tonight. Pack what you can carry and ride north. Don't stop until you reach Denver. This is my home. This is a death trap." His jaw tightened. "Hartman knows I'm alive. He's coming, and he's bringing every gun he can hire. You stay here, you die." Katie's grip tightened on the rifle. "Then why did you come back? Why now, after 3 years of nothing?" "Because I made a mistake." He climbed one step. "I thought staying away would protect you. I was wrong. Hardman's been waiting, watching. He knows the only way to get to me is through you." The sound of hoofbeats came from the south, distant but getting closer. Jake heard them too. His hand dropped to his gun, and the 3 riders behind him spread out, forming a line. "How many?" one of them called. Jake's eyes never left Katie's face. Enough. She should have been terrified. She should have run inside and barred the door. Instead, she felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. Anger. Pure, focused anger at the man who'd let her grieve, who'd let her bury an empty coffin while he played dead somewhere in the territories. "I'm not running," she said. "Katie, this is my land. My father died defending it. I'll do the same if I have to." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. The old Jake, the one who'd loved her stubborn streak, flickered in his eyes for just a moment. Then it was gone, replaced by the harder man standing before her. "Then I guess we make our stand here," he said. The riders crested the southern hill. Katie counted 8, no 9, all armed, all riding like they meant business. Jake turned to his men. "Spread out. Use the barn for cover. Don't fire unless they fire first." He looked back at Katie. "Can you still shoot?" She levered around into the chamber. "Better than you, probably." That smile again, brief as lightning. "That's my girl." The words hurt more than any bullet could. 3 years of silence, and now he stood there calling her his girl like nothing had changed. Like everything hadn't changed. The riders kept coming. Katie raised the rifle and waited for her world to explode. The 9 riders stopped just beyond rifle range, forming a semicircle around the ranch house. Katie recognized the man in the center immediately. Cole Hartman sat his horse like a king surveying conquered territory, his silver hair gleaming in the afternoon sun. He'd been trying to buy her land for 2 years, making offers that started reasonable and gradually turned threatening. She'd refused every time, but now she understood it had never been about the ranch. It had always been about Jake. Hartman's voice carried across the distance. Jacob Carter. I heard rumors you were too stubborn to stay dead. Jake stood in the open, his 3 men positioned behind cover at the barn and water trough. Seems like you heard right, Cole. You cost me a lot of money 3 years ago. A lot of powerful people wanted you buried. Yet here I am. Katie's pulse hammered in her ears. The rifle felt heavy in her hands, but she kept it steady, aimed at the riders. Her hired hands, Danny and old Pete, had appeared from the back fields. They'd taken positions on opposite corners of the house, both armed with shotguns. Not enough. Not nearly enough against 9 guns. Hartman leaned forward in his saddle. You know why I'm here. I can guess. The Mexican silver never surfaced. $50,000 worth. Vanished the same night you did. People think you took it. People think a lot of things. Did you? Jake's silence was answer enough. Katie's stomach dropped. Silver. He'd stolen silver and faked his death, leaving her to mourn while he ran with stolen money. The anger in her chest burned hotter. Hartman straightened. Here's what happens next. You tell me where it is, and I kill you quick. Clean shot, no suffering. The girl lives, your friends live, everyone walks away except you. And if I don't, then I burn this ranch to the ground with all of you inside. Then I spend the next month tracking down everyone you've ever cared about and doing the same to them. Your choice, Jake. One of Jake's men, a lean Mexican with 2 guns on his hips, spoke without taking his eyes off the riders. We can take them. Katie's mind raced. Silver. Stolen silver. She thought back to that last week before Jake disappeared. He'd been agitated, secretive. She'd chalked it up to the dangers of his work as a scout for the army. She never imagined he was planning to rob someone. The silver's gone, Jake called out. Spent it. Every last dollar. Hartman laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. 3 years and $50,000? That's some expensive living, even for you. Expensive staying hidden. New names, new papers, bribes. You know how it works. I don't believe you. Believe what you want. The money's gone. Katie saw Hartman's hand move toward his gun, and she made her decision. She stepped down from the porch, walking past Jake to stand in the open space between the 2 groups.
The rifle hung at her side, non-threatening but present.
This is my property, she said, her voice carrying clear and strong. Whatever business you have with Jake, it doesn't concern my land. Hartman's eyes fixed on her with the cold calculation of a snake measuring a mouse. Miss Katie, your loyalty is admirable but misplaced. This man let you believe he was dead while he spent stolen money in San Francisco. Did he tell you that? Did he mention the gambling halls and the women? She didn't flinch, though the words cut deep. What he did or didn't do 3 years ago doesn't give you the right to threaten my home. Your home sits on land I need, land I've been trying to buy fair and square. You refused. Now I have a reason to take it by force, and the law will call it justified. Jake Carter is a wanted thief. Anyone harboring him is breaking the law. Jake moved to stand beside Katie. She felt the heat of him, close enough to touch but a universe away. She didn't know I was alive until 10 minutes ago. You want me? Fine. Leave her out of it. Can't do that. Hartman's smile was thin and cruel. See, I need to send a message. People need to understand what happens when they steal from the syndicate. It's not just about you anymore, Jake. It's about every 2-bit outlaw who thinks he can run with our money. The Mexican drew both guns in a blur of motion. Say the word, Jake. Jake's hand pressed against Katie's back, gentle but insistent, pushing her toward the house. She resisted, planting her feet. He'd left her once without explanation. She wouldn't be moved by him again. Katie, he said, low and urgent. Please, no. One of Hartman's men, a heavy-set brute with a scarred face, pulled his rifle from its saddle holster. The movement rippled through both groups. Hammers clicked back. Horses sidestepped nervously. Last chance, Hartman said. Tell me where the silver is, or everybody dies. Starting with the girl. Katie raised her rifle, sighting down the barrel at Hartman's chest. Her voice came out steady, hard as iron. You can try. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. The wind kicked up dust between them, swirling it into shapes that looked like dancing ghosts. Katie's finger rested on the trigger, applying just enough pressure to feel the tension. She'd killed rattlesnakes and coyotes and once a rabid dog that came after her horses. She'd never killed a man, but looking at Hartman's cold eyes, she knew she could. Jake's voice was barely a whisper. When the shooting starts, run for the house. Don't stop. Don't look back. I'm not running. Katie Hartman's hand dropped toward his gun. The world exploded in gunfire and smoke and screaming horses. Katie pulled the trigger, felt the rifle buck against her shoulder. Hartman jerked sideways, and she couldn't tell if she'd hit him or if he ducked. Jake's gun was out, firing twice, 3 times. The Mexican's pistols roared. Someone screamed. Strong hands grabbed Katie and yanked her backward. She stumbled, nearly fell, but Jake held her up, dragging her toward the porch. Bullets chewed splinters from the wooden posts. A window shattered behind them. She heard Danny's shotgun boom from the roof. They made it inside just as the front wall erupted with impacts. Jake slammed the door and shoved her down below the window line. He reloaded his pistol with hands that moved like water, fast and sure. You hit? He asked. No. Stay down. Keep your head below the windows. Katie crawled to the broken window and peered out. 4 of Hartman's men were down in the dirt, dead or wounded. The others had scattered, using whatever cover they could find. She saw one behind the water trough, another flat against the side of the barn. Hartman himself had made it to the old woodshed, firing from behind its corner. Jake's men were still in the fight. The Mexican had taken a position in the barn loft, his pistols picking off targets with methodical precision. The other 2, both hard-looking men Katie didn't know, were trading shots from behind an overturned wagon. Pete burst through the back door, his face pale. Danny's hit. Shoulder wound, but he's bleeding bad. Katie moved without thinking, muscle memory, from years of ranch accidents taking over. Get him to the kitchen table. Boil water.
Find the medical kit under the sink. Jake caught her.
Katie, you can't. This is my house, my people. I can do whatever I need to do. She jerked free and ran to the kitchen. Danny lay on the floor where Pete had dragged him, his shirt soaked red. He was young, barely 20, and his eyes were wide with shock. Katie grabbed towels, pressed them against the wound. The bullet had gone clean through, which was good. No digging required. You're going to be fine, she told him, working as she talked. Just breathe. Nice and slow. Outside, the gunfire continued in sporadic bursts. Jake appeared in the doorway, his gun still in hand. 2 more down. Hartman's pulling back? Running? Pete asked. Regrouping. They'll wait for dark and come at us from multiple sides. Jake looked at Katie. We need to leave. Now, while we have a chance. Danny can't ride. Then we put him in a wagon. He'll bleed out before we make it 5 miles. Jake's jaw worked, frustration and fear warring across his face. Katie, they're going to burn us out. When the sun goes down, they'll torch the barn, the house, everything. We can't defend against fire. So we don't wait for dark, she tied off the bandage and stood. We go after them. 6 guns against 5 hardened killers? Those aren't odds, that's suicide. It's my ranch. She moved past him to the gun cabinet her father had built into the wall. Inside were 2 more rifles, a box of dynamite left over from blasting stumps, and her father's old Confederate saber. She took the dynamite, weighing the 3 sticks in her hand. And I'm tired of being pushed around. Jake stared at her. You're serious. Dead serious. You said you came back to protect me. Fine. Here's your chance. Something shifted in his expression. The hardness cracked, and underneath she saw the man she'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. The one who taught her to shoot, who'd sat with her when her father died, who'd promised to always come back to her, the one she'd buried in her heart 3 years ago. All right, he said softly. We do it your way. But if things go wrong, they won't. If they do, you run. Promise me. Katie looked at him, this ghost who'd walked back into her life with death on his heels. She wanted to hate him. Part of her did. But standing here with bullets punching holes in her walls and her hired hand bleeding on her kitchen floor, she understood one truth. Whatever Jake had done, whatever lies he'd told, he'd come back. When it mattered most, he'd come back. I promise, she said. The lie tasted like ashes, but he seemed to believe it. Jake gathered his men in the barn while Katie finished bandaging Danny. The Mexican, whose name was Carlos, had a bullet graze across his ribs that he barely acknowledged. The other two, brothers named Ben and Lucas, were uninjured but running low on ammunition. 6 shots each, Ben reported. Maybe 12 between us if we're lucky. The lady has more rifles, Carlos said. I saw the cabinet. 3 rifles, maybe 20 rounds total, Katie said, climbing down from the loft. Plus the dynamite. Lucas whistled low. You planning to blow up your own ranch? I'm planning to blow up anyone trying to take it. Jake spread a rough map in the dust, drawing with his finger. Hartman's here, behind the woodshed. 2 men with him, probably his best shots. The other 2 are here and here, pinned down but not out of the fight. When the sun starts dropping, they'll move. That's when we hit them. What's the play? Carlos asked. Katie circles around the north ridge with the dynamite. Gets above their position. When she lights the first stick, we rush them from here. Catch them between the explosion and our guns. Ben shook his head. That's a lot of faith in a woman who probably never threw dynamite before. Katie pulled a match from her pocket. My father used dynamite to clear beaver dams. I was lighting fuses when I was 12. Clearing dams isn't the same as killing men. Then it's a good thing I'm a fast learner. The sun crawled toward the horizon, painting the valley in shades of orange and red that looked too much like fire. Katie waited behind the north ridge, watching Hartman and his men through the scope of her father's rifle. They were talking, planning their own attack. She could see the tension in their postures, the way they kept checking the house. They didn't know she'd left. They thought she was trapped inside with the others. The first stick of dynamite felt heavy in her hands. She'd cut the fuse short, maybe 15 seconds. Long enough to throw, short enough that they couldn't throw it back. The match scraped against stone and the fuse hissed to life. She stood, counted 3, and hurled the dynamite with everything she had. It arced through the air, tumbling end over end. Hartman looked up, his face registering shock too late. The explosion ripped through the woodshed, sending splinters and smoke in all directions. Katie lit the second stick before the echo faded, throwing it toward where she'd seen the other 2 men. Gunfire erupted from the barn. Jake and his men charged through the smoke, shooting as they ran. Katie worked the rifle bolt, sighting on a figure stumbling through the haze. She squeezed the trigger, saw him drop. Hartman emerged from the smoke, his face bloody, his gun up. He fired 3 times toward the barn. Carlos spun and went down. Ben and Lucas dove for cover. Jake kept coming, his face a mask of cold fury. Katie threw the third stick. It landed 10 feet from Hartman and exploded, the blast wave knocking him sideways. He hit the ground hard, but somehow kept his grip on his gun. He rolled, firing blindly, and 1 shot caught Jake in the leg. Jake stumbled but didn't fall. He closed the distance, his gun leveled at Hartman's head. Katie saw his finger tighten on the trigger. "Jake!" she screamed. "Don't!" He froze, looking up at her on the ridge. In that moment of hesitation, Hartman's hand moved toward something on his belt. A second gun. A holdout. Katie didn't think. She fired from the hip, pure instinct, and Hartman jerked as the bullet took him in the shoulder. His gun clattered away. Jake kicked it further, then stood over him, breathing hard. The last 2 of Hartman's men threw down their weapons and raised their hands. It was over. Katie slid down the ridge, her legs shaking with adrenaline. Jake limped toward her, favoring his wounded leg. They met in the middle of the battlefield, surrounded by smoke and bodies in the ruins of her woodshed. "You saved my life," he said. "You came back for me," she replied. They stood there, 2 feet apart, a gulf of 3 years and 1,000 lies between them. Jake reached out slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a spooked horse. His hand touched her face, and Katie realized she was crying. "I'm sorry," he said. "For all of it. The lies. The disappearing. Making you think I was dead. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just a coward." "You were," she agreed. "You are. I know. You let me bury an empty coffin. You let me grieve." "I know, and now you've brought death to my doorstep." "I know." His thumb brushed away a tear. "Right now, take my men and disappear again. You'll never see me. Hartman's finished, and his bosses will think twice before sending anyone else. You'll be safe." Katie looked at him, this broken, scarred man who'd shattered her heart and somehow still held all the pieces. She thought about the empty years, the cold bed, the mornings she'd woken up forgetting he was gone. She thought about the man she'd built in her memory, perfect and heroic and utterly false. And she thought about the real Jake, standing here bleeding and sorry and absolutely sincere in his brokenness. "The silver," she said. Did you really spend it all? He hesitated. No. Where is it? Buried. Under the oak tree by your father's grave. I put it there the night before I left. I always meant for you to have it. Then why didn't you tell me? Because if Hartman's people came looking and you didn't know, they couldn't torture it out of you. The money was insurance. If anything happened to me, if I really did die, eventually you would have found it. You would have been taken care of. Carlos limped over, pressing a hand to his bleeding ribs. We need to move, Jake. Hartman's not dead, and he's got friends. More will come. Jake didn't look away from Katie. Tell me what you want. I'll do it. Whatever you want. She wanted him to suffer. She wanted him gone. She wanted him to hold her and never let go. She wanted to scream and hit him and fall apart in his arms. She wanted everything and nothing, all at once. I want the truth, she said finally. All of it. Who you really are, what you've done, where you've been. No more lies. No more protection. I want to decide for myself what risks I'm willing to take. And then we'll see. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close. But it was a start. They buried the dead in the rocky ground south of the ranch, marking the graves with simple stones. Hartman was still alive, but barely, his shoulder shattered and his face burned from the dynamite. Jake sent Lucas to town for the sheriff with a message. Hartman and his men had attacked the ranch unprovoked, and there were witnesses to prove it. In the quiet after the storm, Katie finally heard the whole story. Jake sat across from her at the kitchen table, the same table where her father had taught her to read, where she'd signed the deed after he died. The lamp between them cast shadows that made Jake look even older than his years. I was working as a scout for the army, he began. You knew that part. What you didn't know was I was also reporting to the territorial marshal. There was a smuggling ring running silver from Mexico up through Texas using army supply routes to hide the shipments. Hartman was the middleman, paying off officers and covering the trail. Katie poured coffee, her hands steady now. Outside, Carlos and Ben kept watch while Lucas rode for town. Danny slept in the spare room, his shoulder bandaged and his fever down. Pete had gone to check the livestock, make sure none had been hit by stray bullets. The marshal asked me to infiltrate the operation, get evidence, names, details of the routes. I spent 8 months working my way into Hartman's confidence. Jake's fingers traced patterns on the table. I got the information, but then I found out something else. What? Your ranch sits on top of an old Spanish mission? The foundations are still there, buried under your south pasture. Hartman believed there was treasure underneath, gold and silver from the mission days. He wanted your land not for cattle or crops, but to dig it all up. Katie absorbed this. She'd found old pottery shards and bits of adobe brick when plowing, but she'd never imagined anything valuable. Is there treasure? I don't know. Maybe. But Hartman believed it, and he was willing to kill for it. When I reported back to the marshal, he told me to drop it. Said the mission treasure was just a legend and not worth the trouble. But I'd seen the look in Hartman's eyes. I knew he'd come after you eventually. So you stole his silver shipment? 50,000 in silver bars. I had help, men I trusted. We hit the convoy and made it look like an Apache raid. My friends scattered with the evidence we'd gathered, taking it to federal marshals in Denver and San Francisco. I took the silver and disappeared, leaving a blood trail that led into Mexico. Let everyone think I died in the desert. Why not just tell me? Jake's eyes met hers, and she saw the pain there. Because Hartman would have questioned you, would have threatened you, hurt you. If you didn't know anything, you couldn't tell him anything. I buried the silver here, where I knew you'd find it eventually, and then I ran. Spent 3 years building a new identity, gathering allies, waiting for Hartman to give up. But he didn't. He couldn't. The silver wasn't his. It belonged to the syndicate, powerful men in Dallas and Houston. They wanted it back, and they wanted the thief dead. Hartman's reputation depended on recovering it. When I heard he was pressuring you to sell, I knew I'd been wrong. Staying away hadn't protected you. It had just made you a target. Katie stood and walked to the window. Dawn was coming, painting the eastern sky pale gray. Her ranch looked like a battlefield, scars and bullet holes marking the day's violence. But it was still standing. Still hers. The silver, she said. We should dig it up. And then? She turned to face him. And then we use it to rebuild. Fix what's broken. Maybe hire some proper hands, ones who can shoot as well as they can rope cattle, buy breeding stock, make this ranch something worth fighting for. You're staying? This is my home, Jake. I'm not leaving because some criminals want what's mine. They'll send others. Let them come. He stood slowly, favoring his wounded leg. I brought this to your door. It's my fault." "Yes, it is." She crossed to him, stopping just out of reach. "You made a lot of choices that hurt me. Lied to me. Left me alone to grieve something that wasn't even real. I don't know if I can forgive that." "I understand. But," she continued, "you also came back? When it mattered, when I needed you most, you showed up. That counts for something. What are you saying?" Katie took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision settle in her chest. I'm saying you can stay. Help rebuild. Prove you're more than the man who ran away. But this is my ranch, my rules. You want to be here, you work for it. Earn it. No more secrets, no more lies. Clear?" A smile ghosted across Jake's face, fragile as morning mist. "Clear. And, Jake, you ever fake your death again? I'll make it real." He laughed, a sound she'd forgotten, and something tight in her chest loosened just a fraction. It would take time. Maybe years. Maybe forever. But time was something they had now. The sheriff arrived at noon with 4 deputies ready for a fight. He found bodies being buried, wounds being tended, and Katie standing on her porch like she owned the world, which, in a sense, she did. Every board and nail, every acre and animal, paid for with her sweat and her father's blood. Sheriff Morrison was a practical man who'd known Katie since she was born. He took one look at the scene, listened to her story, and nodded. Self-defense. Clear as day. Hartman, conscious but weak, tried to protest. Morrison cut him off. "You rode onto this property with 9 armed men and opened fire. I got 3 witnesses who will swear to it, plus the lady herself. You're lucky she's not pressing charges for attempted murder." "She's harboring a fugitive," Hartman rasped. "Jacob Carter is wanted for theft. Funny thing about that." Morrison pulled a telegram from his pocket. "Got this from the territorial marshal this morning. Seems there's been a development in the Carter case. New evidence suggests he was working undercover, and the charges have been dropped. Somebody sent a whole file of evidence to the federal courthouse, names and dates and everything. Whole smuggling operations being rolled up as we speak." Jake met Carlos's eyes across the yard. The Mexican just smiled, innocent as a choir boy. His friends from 3 years ago had come through after all. Morrison had Hartman loaded into a wagon along with his surviving men. "You're headed to Austin to answer for those silver shipments. Federal marshals are real interested in talking to you." As the wagon rolled away, Katie felt the last of the tension drain from her shoulders. It was over. Really, truly over. They dug up the silver that afternoon, all of them together. The oak tree stood tall and proud by her father's grave, its roots wrapped around $50,000 in silver bars. Jake and Carlos hauled them up while Katie watched, her emotions too tangled to name. "What will you do with it?" Carlos asked. Katie looked at the ranch, at the bullet-scarred walls and the burned woodshed and the blood-stained ground. She looked at Jake, leaning on a shovel with his wounded leg, at Carlos with his bandaged ribs, at Ben and Lucas and Pete and young Danny sleeping off his injury. "I'm going to build something," she said. "Something that lasts." The weeks that followed were hard work. They rebuilt the woodshed first, then patched the house and barn. Word spread about the fight, and offers of help came from neighboring ranches. People respected someone who stood their ground, who fought for what was theirs. Katie hired 3 new hands, vetted carefully by Carlos, who had an eye for men who could be trusted. The silver went into the bank in town, properly documented and above board. Some of it went to improvements, but Katie kept most in reserve. She had learned the hard way that security wasn't about money or guns or even love. It was about standing firm when the world pushed back. Jake stayed. True to his word, he worked like a man possessed. Up before dawn to feed stock, mending fences until his hands bled, learning the 1,000 small tasks that made a ranch run. He slept in the bunkhouse with Carlos and the others, never presuming to claim a place in Katie's house. Some nights she watched him from her window, seeing him check the perimeter one last time before bed, and something in her softened. But forgiveness wasn't instant. It came in small moments, hard-won. The day he helped her deliver a difficult calf, his hands steady and sure. The evening he sat with her on the porch and told her about San Francisco, about the gambling he'd done to create his alibi, about the empty hotel rooms and the constant fear of discovery. The morning she woke to find he'd already done her chores, trying to let her sleep in for once. 3 months after the gunfight, Katie walked to the bunkhouse after supper. Jake sat outside, cleaning his rifle. He looked up when she approached, wariness in his eyes. "I've been thinking," she said. "That's never good." She almost smiled. "About what you said. That you thought you were protecting me by leaving. I was wrong. You were. She sat beside him on the bench. But I understand why you thought it. You loved me. You wanted me safe. Sometimes love makes people stupid. Katie, let me finish. She took the rifle from his hands, set it aside. I've spent 3 months watching you prove yourself, working yourself half to death trying to make amends. And I realized something. What? I'm still angry. I'm still hurt. Part of me might always be hurt. She took his hand, feeling the calluses from hard work. I also still love you, probably always will. And I'm tired of letting the past steal my present. Jake's fingers tightened on hers. What are you saying? I'm saying move into the house. Not my room, not yet. But the spare room, the one by the kitchen. I'm saying eat breakfast with me. Talk to me about your day. Let me know when you're hurting or scared or happy. Be here, really here. Not just working yourself to death to earn my forgiveness. I don't deserve. Maybe not. But I'm not doing this for what you deserve. I'm doing it for what I need. She leaned her head against his shoulder. I need someone who knows me, who understands what this place means. I need a partner, not a martyr. They sat in silence as the sun set, painting the valley in shades of gold. Somewhere in the barn, Carlos was singing in Spanish. One of the horses whinnied. The evening wind carried the scent of sage and dust and home. Thank you, Jake whispered. Katie didn't answer, just held his hand and watched the stars emerge. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new work, new tests of their fragile peace. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, she felt complete. 6 months later, the ranch was thriving. Katie had expanded the herd, built new corrals, and even started a breeding program for horses. Jake worked as her foreman, managing the hands and dealing with buyers. They moved easily around each other, a partnership built on shared purpose and growing trust. The spare room stayed the spare room, but Jake took most of his meals in the kitchen, and they spent most evenings on the porch talking about the day. Small steps, baby steps, but forward movement nonetheless. Carlos had stayed on, becoming Katie's head of security. He hired men he trusted, built a network of information that stretched across 3 territories. No one would sneak up on the ranch again. Ben and Lucas had moved on, heading to Montana to start their own outfit, but they promised to return if Katie ever needed them. On a cool autumn evening, Katie found Jake by her father's grave. He stood under the oak tree, hat in his hands, looking at the simple marker. I talk to him sometimes, Jake said when she approached. Your father? Tell him about the ranch, about you. Ask his forgiveness for the trouble I caused. What do you think he'd say? Probably shoot me. Jake smiled sadly. Then tell me to treat you right or he'd shoot me again. Sounds like him. Jake turned to face her. Katie, I need to tell you something. Her heart clenched. After 6 months of peace, she'd been waiting for the other boot to drop. What? I got a letter from the marshal. They're done with the trial. Hartman and his bosses are going to prison. The whole operation's shut down. It's over. Really over.
Relief washed through her. That's good news. There's more.
They're offering me a job. Deputy marshal working out of Denver. Good pay, respect, all legal and above board. A chance to start fresh with a clean name. Katie's stomach dropped. You want to take it? No. He stepped closer, his eyes intense. I want to stay here. With you. If you'll have me, Jake. I know I've got no right to ask. I know I broke your trust and it's taking time to rebuild it. But Katie, this ranch, you, this life we're building, it's everything I never knew I wanted. I'd rather shovel manure and mend fences with you than be a marshal anywhere else. She studied his face, seeing the truth there. 6 months ago, she might not have believed him, but she'd watched him choose her every single day since he'd returned. Watched him turn down easier paths, watched him commit to the hard work of earning her trust. The room, she said quietly. What? The spare room. It's time you moved out of it. His breath caught. Katie, into mine. She took his hands. I'm not saying it'll be perfect. I'm not saying I won't wake up some nights angry at you for what you put me through. But I'm saying I choose this. I choose us. I choose to trust you again. Jake pulled her close, and Katie let herself lean into him, breathing in the smell of leather and sage and home. His arms wrapped around her, solid and sure. I'll spend the rest of my life earning this, he murmured, against her hair. I know you will. They stood under the oak tree as the stars came out, two people who'd found each other, lost each other, and found their way back. The silver was gone, invested in lumber and livestock, and a future neither had dared to imagine. The ghosts were laid to rest, both the ones Jake had faked and the ones Katie had buried. Tomorrow they'd wake up early and work until sunset, building something that would outlast them both. They'd argue over feed prices and fence lines and whether to buy that paint mare from the auction. They'd sit on the porch in the evening and plan next season's breeding program. They'd live. Katie pulled back just enough to see Jake's face. "Don't leave again. Never. Promise me." "I promise." He kissed her forehead, gentle as prayer. "I'm home, Katie. Really home, and I'm never leaving you again." She believed him. Not because he'd earned absolute trust or because the past was forgotten. She believed him because she'd seen him choose her every day for 6 months, seen him put in the work, seen him become the man he'd always had the potential to be, and if he was ever tempted to run again, she'd be there to remind him what they'd built together, what they were still building, one day at a time. The ranch lights glowed warm in the darkness, marking the home they'd fought for, died for, and chosen to build together. Katie Carter, who'd thought her cowboy was gone forever, stood in his arms and looked at their future with clear eyes. She thought he was gone, but he'd return for her, and now, finally, they were both home.